The patch notes for patch 9.22, the last patch of the season, have finally been released. This is going to be a really good patch filled with some nice balanced changes as long as access to a brand new champion. Just a reminder for all of you that play ranked, the season ends on November 19th, so make sure that you get in your grind before that time. For those of you who haven't already, make sure to check out our website, GameLeap.com. There we have hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion specific courses, so if that is something that interests you, then make sure to check us out using the link in the description below. Now, without further ado, let's dive into patch 9.22. Our newest champion, Senna, is going to be joining us on the Rift on November 10th. Don't worry, we'll definitely be covering her a little bit before her launch, and then once we get a chance to play her and play against her, we may revisit her later as well. Ashe has been seeing a lot of dominance in the bot lane, especially early on into the laning phase with her guaranteed poke from W. This is a spell that you're pretty much guaranteed to hit in the laning phase unless the enemy champions are hiding behind minions, meaning it's very hard to deal with Ashe early on into the game. So the mana cost is going to be upped, so she's not able to spam the ability quite as much. This is a pretty big nerf. Normally 20 extra mana on an ability isn't too big of a deal, but Ashe's W already was so cheap that you're going to be feeling that a lot more. Next up is another resident of the bot lane in Blitzcrank. Blitzcrank is a little bit too strong at the moment, and they don't want to revert the range buffs that they gave to his Q a few patches earlier. Instead, Blitzcrank's Q is going to be dealing a little bit less damage at each rank, perhaps giving you a chance to survive even after being hooked. Now, I really don't think this is going to be all too big of a change for Blitzcrank. You don't exactly pick him for the damage on his Q, you're more worried about landing that hook and getting the knockup. Ivern received some quality of life bug fixes to his Q at some point during last patch. These bug fixes had not gone live yet for our last patch notes video, so we thought that we'd cover them here just to let you guys know. Activating Ivern's dash will put him in melee range of the target, meaning he's going to be able to use his Q to go directly on top of camps, mark them, and clear them a lot quicker. Now, moving on, simply put, Caixa does way too much damage. For this reason, Caixa's Q is being nerfed. For every missile that hits after the first one, it's going to be decreased down to 25% instead of 30%. I think this is a great start for Caixa, but she will probably still need a few more nerfs after this one in order to put her on the same level as every other ADC. Speaking of other ADCs, we've got a buff to Calista. Now, I did not expect this at all. Generally, Calista is left weak because she's too strong at the highest level of plays, but she's pretty bad at the lowest level of play. It's a very pleasant surprise to see that these buffs are targeting teamwork with her W. For those of you who don't know how Calista's W works, whenever she or her bonded ally auto a target, it will mark that target, and then whenever the other one autos that target as well, it will proc % max HP damage. In order to get access to this damage, they both need to auto the target, and they can't swap targets. This means that in order to access Calista's damage in its entirety, you have to have good teamwork. This patch, Calista's W is getting buffed at all ranks. Just having 1 point in the ability will double the amount of damage it's dealing, and then once you have the ability maxed out, it'll just scale down to a 3% increase. The duration of the mark is also increasing by a full second, meaning if either you or your partner gets an auto off on the enemy champions in bot lane, you're going to be able to exert a little bit more pressure for longer. Now, I'm going to be brutally honest here. These buffs are huge. But the main thing is, most people can't play Calista, so you probably won't see any difference, but for those Calista players out there, you're definitely going to be liking her a lot more. Now, the next champion receiving an adjustment this patch is going to be Kale. Kale is just too strong at the moment, especially in the laning phase when she's intended to be a late game hyper carry. For this reason, the damage on Kale's Q is going to be lowered and the mana cost on her W is going to be increased. Now, these are the abilities that she uses to poke and sustain herself in the laning phase, meaning she's not going to be able to dominate quite as easily as soon as she hits 2 items. You also will have a little bit more access to poke her or all in her as a melee once she hits 6. Moving on, AP Malphite is just too strong at the moment, and he's not intended to be played that way. Don't get me wrong, AP Malphite is really fun to play, but he doesn't exactly have all too much counterplay available to the average champion. For this reason, they're taking 0.2 AP ratio off of his ultimate, so he doesn't have as high of a chance to 100 to 0 you just from being even. Now, if you are able to get a lead on AP Malphite, you're still going to be 100 to 0ing people, but you're not going to be able to do it nearly as frequently without one. Nautilus is getting 50 damage taken off of the primary target for his ultimate at all ranks. Honestly, this nerf isn't that big of a deal. Nautilus isn't really picked for his damage, he's more picked for his lockdown potential and his ability to empower most ADCs. Nautilus should still be a fantastic pick in the support role as long as you ban Morgana. Pantheon is finally getting some nerfs after Riot had a chance to look at his pick ban during Worlds. Honestly, this champion is way too strong, and these nerfs probably are not going to change this fact. The damage reduction to minions on his Q is being increased by 10%, meaning he won't be able to shove at level 9 nearly as quickly without a little bit more items. The threshold to trigger the execute damage for his Q is also going to be lowered by 5%. This is probably the biggest nerf out of all of his nerfs, simply because if you were below 25% HP versus Pantheon, you were probably going to die to his next Q. This effectively translates into you having 5% more HP against Pantheon. Pantheon's W is also not going to be sped up by boots anymore, although I don't think this is a change that's going to be all that noticeable, as most people didn't even know that that was a thing. Sejuani is getting her numbers cleaned up, as well as a buff to her Q. They're increasing the base damage on her Q, as well as giving her an additional 0.2 ability power ratio on it. If we're lucky, this might open us up to seeing something like a Bruiser Sejuani build where she builds health and AP. This sounds like it would be a lot more fun to play and a lot less frustrating to play against, in my opinion. Other than that, her E is getting a bug fix so that the duration properly resets whenever she reapplies max stacks. This bug fix is actually a pretty big deal because if you were, for example, silenced or something and auto-attacking something that was at max stacks, sometimes that would just fizzle and then you'd have to restack her passive. Silas is getting some very small adjustments, making it so that his W is going to be a little bit cheaper, as well as updating some of his base stats. Honestly, these changes are so small that they probably won't be noticeable at all. Silas's main issue isn't mana costs, so that's really not going to affect him all too much, and a change in base stats like this isn't going to be noticeable. The visual indicator on Thresh's E is going to be updated this patch so that it matches its actual hitbox a little bit better. This isn't an actual gameplay change, so we're really not going to be seeing any difference with Thresh. Finally, we've got a nerf to the other ADC that has been so dominant this year, Xayah. Xayah's W grants her an insane amount of attack speed, and with the fact that she oftentimes is going to be going a 100% crit build, pretty much nothing can match her DPS. For this reason, the attack speed that she gets from her W is going to be reduced to a more manageable level. She will probably still be one of the best ADCs in the game, but she shouldn't be head and shoulders above the rest along with Caixa. Now that is all that we have for the final patch of the season, patch 9.22. If you're looking for a learning tool to help you with your climb during this end of season, then you should definitely go to our website and check it out. Our website has hundreds of guides, all done by challenger players, sorted into a quick and easy to use courses system. We have courses both on the 5 fundamental roles as well as champion specific courses, so if that is something that interests you, then make sure to check it out using the link in the description below. I've checked out a lot of the content on there myself personally, and I can honestly say it is all very high quality. As always, I'm Panther, I hope you learned something valuable, and I will see you in the next one.